Pattern Language, written by Christopher Alexander, Murray Silverstein, and Sarah Ishikawa, is a comprehensive guide to architectural design that provides solutions to common problems in designing buildings, towns, and communities. It was published in 1977 and is the second in a series of 3 books by Alexander. The first being The Timeless Way of Building, then this volume, A Pattern Language, and thirdly, The Oregon Experiment. The book presents a set of patterns that the authors argue can be combined in an unlimited number of ways to create unique and appropriate designs. The book is not a prescriptive how-to manual, but rather a collection of design principles and techniques that the authors believe are essential to creating successful and sustainable environments for people to live. One of the key themes of the book is the importance of user-centered design. The authors argue that the design of a building or community should be guided by the needs and desires of the people who actually use it, rather than by any abstract aesthetic principle or preconceived idea. They argue that designers should focus on creating environments that support human well-being, rather than just accommodating the functional requirements of, for example, a house or a school. The book presents a set of 253 individual patterns, each of which consists of a problem statement, a detailed description of the solution's components, and a proposed solution. The patterns are organised into a hierarchy, with higher-level patterns being more general and lower-level patterns being more specific. This allows the reader to quickly find relevant information while still providing a comprehensive overview of the design process. The 253 patterns are organised into 3 distinctive categories. Towns, being the first and more general, describes patterns for urban design, such as the organisation of neighbourhoods, streets, or public spaces. We then have buildings. This category includes patterns for architectural design, such as the layout of rooms, windows, and stairs. And finally, we have construction. This category covers the patterns for building technology and materials like insulation or roofing, but also discusses things like the importance of natural light. Each pattern is described in detail, and the book provides examples of how the patterns can be applied in real-life situations. The patterns are intended to provide a language for design that can help people create livable and sustainable environments. Here is an example of a pattern from each category. For towns, we are looking at independent regions. This is the first pattern of the 253, and its problem statement is this. Metropolitan regions will not come to balance until each one is small enough to be an independent sphere of culture. This pattern promotes that urban centres need to be self-sufficient culturally and socially while enjoying a decentralised form of government. This, according to the authors, makes a healthy mix of residential, commercial, and recreational areas. The proposed solution is this. Wherever possible, work towards the evolution of independent regions in the world, each with a population between 2 and 10 million, each with its own natural and geological boundaries, and each with its own economy, each one autonomous and self-governing, without intervening power of larger states or countries. For the buildings example, we're looking at paths and goals. Its problem statement is this. The layout of paths will seem right and comfortable only when it is compatible with the process of walking, and the process of walking is far more subtle than one might imagine. This pattern looks at how we navigate through the spaces of the in-between, and how, if our path to our destination isn't overtly clear, we employ a series of goals to reach along the way. Therefore, designing paths and walkable connections requires a consideration of what lies along it, not just what lies at the end. The proposed solution is this. To lay out paths, first glance at goals or natural points of interest, then connect the goals to one another to form the paths. The paths may be straight or gently curving between goals. Their paving should swell around the goal. The goals should never be more than a few hundred feet apart. Lastly, for the construction category, we are looking at final column distribution. Its problem statement is this. How should the spacing of the secondary columns, which stiffen the walls, vary with ceiling height, number of stories, and the size of rooms? This pattern is a good example of how the authors want to convey technical solutions and not just social or anthropological analysis of design. Alexander embodies the mantras of holism in his work, expressing that all aspects of building and community must be considered. The proposed solution is this: make column stiffeners furthest apart at the ground floor and closer together as you go higher in the building. The exact column spacings for a particular building will depend on the heights and loads of the wall thicknesses. The number in the following table are for illustration only, but show roughly what is needed. Mark in extra stiffening columns as dots between your corner columns and on the drawings you have made for different floors, them so they are evenly spaced between each pair of corner columns, but on any one floor, make sure they are closer together along the walls of small rooms and further apart along the walls of larger rooms. Each of these examples shows how the authors considered building to be more than just a technical endeavour. One of the key strengths of the book is its emphasis on the importance of context. The authors argue that the design of a building or community should take into account its specific location, culture, and history. They argue that the design of a building or community should reflect the local climate, landscape, and culture, rather than just imposing an alien lifestyle or aesthetic. Certain views outlined in some patterns, however, can very much be considered out of date in the 2020s. The book reflects the cultural norms and gender roles of its time, and some of the patterns may reinforce traditional gender roles, such as assuming that women are primarily responsible for childcare and domestic work. Also, while reinforcement of social sustainability is a strength, environmental awareness is not as particularly considered. It's clear that Alexander is, through his patterns, seeking to reject modernism and a conformist approach to design. But this is done in a way that isn't postmodern, rather it's more pre-modern, that long-established traditional societies provide enough of an aesthetic and functional framework, or more specifically a design language, to make sustainable designs within a cohesive environment. This then makes the book theoretically transferable to any culture on Earth, and despite being generally Western in its creation, is applicable to any architecture. The book also focuses on the importance of creating environments that are flexible and adaptable over time. The authors argue that buildings and communities should be designed to allow for change and growth, rather than being rigid and inflexible. Again, rejecting the conformity of modernism. They emphasise the importance of creating spaces that are capable of accommodating different users and activities, and that can evolve over time to meet the changing needs of the people who use them. The book is also notable for its holistic approach to design. The authors argue that the design of a building or community should not be considered in isolation, but rather as part of a larger system that includes the surrounding landscape, infrastructure, and a social centre. They argue that designers should consider the interrelatedness of all these elements and work to create environments that support and enhance the overall quality of life for all the people that might use them. In conclusion, then, a pattern language is a comprehensive guide to architectural design that provides a wealth of information and ideas for designing successful and sustainable environments. The book's emphasis on user-centered design, context sensitivity, flexibility, and holistic approach to architecture makes it a valuable resource for architects, planners, and designers, as well as anyone interested in creating environments that support human well-being as a fundamental principle in building. The book's patterns are not prescriptive solutions, but rather a set of design principles and techniques that the authors believe are essential to creating environments that are both functional and beautiful.